Hi, my name is Jack FitzGerald. I am the coordinator at the Warren Bennis Leadership Initiative and co-founder of the Warren Bennis Leadership Experience. I want to welcome you to the 5th annual Warren Bennis Leadership Experience, a program of the initiative. The purpose of the Warren Bennis Leadership Experience is to inspire a leadership movement through the legacy of Warren Bennis. Today, we talk with Daniel Goleman about his emotional intelligence framework, ecological intelligence, and how he came to know Warren Bennis. The wisdom of Warren Bennis came through his conversations with leaders. Today, we continue that legacy in conversation with Dan. Daniel Goleman is best known for his worldwide bestseller, Emotional Intelligence, and is most recently co-author of Altered Traits. Science reveals how meditation changes your mind, brain, and body. A frequent speaker to businesses of all kinds and sizes, Goleman has worked with leaders around the globe, examining the way social and emotional competencies impact the bottom line. Goleman's articles in the Harvard Business Review are among the most frequently requested reprints of all time. His article there, The Focused Leader, won the 2013 Harvard Business Review McKinsey Award for Best Article of the Year. Goleman has been ranked among the 25 most influential business leaders by several business publications, including Time and the Wall Street Journal. Apart from his writing on emotional intelligence, Goleman has written books on topics including self-deception, creativity, transparency, meditation, social and emotional learning, eco-literacy, and the ecological crisis. Let's jump in with our conversation with Daniel Goleman. So Dan, there are some students who, about 150 students watching today, listening to you, who have never met Warren Bennis, myself included, but we are all inspired by his work and his thinking around leadership. And I know that you had the opportunity to meet Warren. How did you two meet?
We met on a small private jet that was taking us to give a talk, or each of us giving separate talks at a mega church outside Chicago. And we were going from LA. We picked him up, I think, in Santa Monica. And we started talking, and we had so much to talk about that we decided that we should resume this when he was in Cambridge, which he was doing. He was at Harvard at the JFK School of Governance, had a department or a division on leadership, executive leadership. And he did a visiting faculty thing there every fall. So he and I would get together when he came to Cambridge. I was living in Western Massachusetts at the time.
And what made you want to work with him? Were there aspects of his work that you saw paralleling yours, or?
It was a combination. First of all, he was a very charming guy. He was someone that you enjoyed hanging out with, that you had fun being with, that was intellectually scintillating, I would say. And so I was very attracted to him as a person. And then we had common interests in leadership, and they turned out to be quite congruent. In fact, we were both so interested in the issue of transparency and blind spots that we ended up writing a book together about that.
Tell us a little bit about that book, Dan.
Well, the book is called Transparency, and it's about the advantages for an organization or a team of having candor, which he was extremely interested in because he saw its value, and the dangers of having blind spots or questions that can't be asked, so to speak, because that diminishes the flow of information. And there's a kind of maxim in information theory that the entity that can take in information most fully and to analyze it and understand it most deeply and respond most nimbly is the most viable. It's the organization that's going to flourish, if you will. And the opposite of that is killing information. And he saw there were many ways that organizations did that to their detriment, or on the other hand, encourage free flow.
And free flow is something that you are known for.
Well, I favor it. And that was, I think, one of the things that bonded Warren and I, because he favored it too. I have a background in clinical psychology, and I'm very interested in interpersonal dynamics. And one of the things that I saw pretty clearly was that there are implicit attentional rules, and we learn them in our family of origin, but we bring them to wherever we go. And the first rule is, here's what we notice. The second rule is, here's what we call it. Here's the language you use for it. The third rule is, here's what we don't notice. And the fourth rule is actually silence, because you can't talk about what you don't notice. And in every family, you have those rules. And every organization has those rules. And part of being socialized into an organization is understanding them and following them. However, the third and the fourth rule are in opposition to free flow of information. So the fewer things we don't notice and can't talk about, the better off we are.
It makes me think we all have families. And when I read those rules in the book, it certainly made me reflect on my own experience. And I know Warren in his writing says that families are they're the first organizations we're a part of.
That's a good way to put it, that thinking of the family as your first organization, and those rules of getting along in your family as rules that you take along with you to successive organizations.
There's a picture of Warren taught a class at the University of Southern California with the president of the university at the time, Steve Sample. And there's a famous picture of the two of them at the front of the classroom, and the students are locked in on their presentation. And on the back of the blackboard is a question: what constitutes a great leader? And I wanted to ask you that question today. What constitutes a great leader, Dan?
Yeah. So I look to the emotional intelligence model because it has different domains of excellence. The first is self-awareness. The second is handling yourself well, or self-mastery. The third is empathy, tuning into other people. And the fourth is relationship abilities, putting that all together to have highly effective interactions. And I would say that a great leader has all of those abilities. First, a great leader is self-aware of what his or her inner life is like, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, how that shapes the way they perceive, the way they're going to act, how they see themselves is congruent with how others see them or not. Then there's handling upsetting emotions. Every emotion is an important signal to ourselves, but we have a choice point, which is what we do once we feel that emotion. And I think great leaders are able to manage emotions very well and to be resilient, to particularly bounce back from being upset. And there's also keeping your eye on the goal despite the distractions of the day or the moment, being positive no matter what happens, whatever setbacks. And finally, what you might call a growth mindset, where you see yourself and other people as able to improve, to develop further, rather than dismissing them as they are. Then the third is empathy, not just cognitive empathy, knowing how a person thinks, or emotional empathy, knowing how they feel, but what's called empathic concern, caring about people. I think this is really important in leaders. I was talking to a friend of mine who does evaluations of what are called C-suite executives, the circle right around the CEO. And she said, well, they all have a very high achievement drive. That's keeping your eye on the goal despite distractions. That's how they got there. But the best ones are also caring. They actually care about the people they lead. And I think this is absolute must in an outstanding leader. And then ways you can put that together, to influence people, to listen well, to take what they say into account as well as what you think should be done, to inspire people, to articulate a shared sense of purpose from the heart and to the heart, not in a phony way, but in a real way that moves people to give their best. Working out disagreements. Coaching is very important in a leader. Seeing yourself as having a responsibility to help the people who work for you get better, particularly develop the strengths that will help them in their careers. And then teamwork, being a team player and bringing your best to the team. I think all of that are signs of great leadership.
One of the things that struck me is that you talked about in another interview I listened to how this is important in organizations, but then you've done some work with children around this in social and emotional learning. And why is that? Why is it paramount that we teach this to children?
Well, I'm a big advocate for teaching emotional intelligence in schools to kids. And there are now more than several hundred programs, perhaps globally, in what's called social emotional learning. In fact, when I wrote the book Emotional Intelligence, the subtext was an argument for doing this, for teaching this in schools. And there are a number of reasons it's particularly important. One is neuroanatomical. It turns out that the circuitry for social and emotional skill takes shape during childhood and it becomes anatomically mature in our mid-20s. That means there's a one-time window of opportunity to help kids get it right in the first place, be able to manage their impulsive emotions, for example, and think through what consequences might be before they act. That's a big one. And kids learn it in different ways throughout childhood. Empathy, tuning into other kids, understanding how what you do makes someone else feel. These are crucial lessons for life. And if you get it right in childhood, you'll have it right throughout the rest of your life. So I think it makes sense to teach this to kids. You can learn any of this later in life. It's never too late. It just takes more effort.
I was going to ask what that could mean for college age students at a university.
There's a funny gap I've noticed in SEL, which is that there are programs K through 12, which get you to your senior year in high school. There are almost no programs in college. And then in graduate school, there's a lot of remedial work being done. If you're going to be a doctor, you got to learn empathy. If you're going to be in business, you have to learn, these fundamentals. If you're going to be, in other words, once you go into a graduate program, particularly the applied ones, all of a sudden this becomes important. The problem in college is this. The way the curriculum is put together, and this is my critique, and I say it as someone who was the child of college teachers, but does not teach myself. There's a big defect in the way curriculums are put together, and that is that academics get points toward their career for publication, and publication in a very balkanized, narrow area that is their specialty. And they teach according to whatever their interests happen to be. But there's really nowhere in the curriculum that social emotional learning fits. There's no one who's an advocate for it, or very, very rarely. Maybe there are a handful of schools where this happens, but it's always because there's a faculty member who cares about it. And so my advice to college students is do this on your own. Get it any way you can.
And what would motivate, what's the motivation behind pursuing emotional intelligence?
Well, let's talk about college students for one. Your romantic partner, the person you want to be with and be with for a long time, is someone who's emotionally intelligent. Or let me put it differently. If you're with someone who has zero empathy, zero impulse control, that relationship is just not going to last. So I think the first motivator might be your personal life. A second motivator might be the understanding that this is going to help you no matter what career you go into, whether you're an entrepreneur starting your own business or going to work for a large organization or teaching, or whatever it may be, one of the professions. It's very interesting. You need to do well in school to get in the door. That means you need the cognitive abilities. You need IQ, essentially. Once you're in the door, though, everyone else is as smart as you are. It's not a differentiator anymore. What starts to differentiate people over the course of their career is their personal skills, how they manage themselves, how they handle other people, their empathy, in other words, emotional intelligence. We have lots of data on this now, that the best leaders are emotionally intelligent. The people who stand out as stars in any field are emotionally intelligent. Lately there have been some very high profile examples of Olympic stars deciding to step out of competition because it wasn't good for them. They understood that their emotional state was extremely important, and the way they were driving themselves was not helping. So I think that's an example of emotional intelligence. It helps you make decisions that are good for your life.
Do you see, like that example that you just referenced of the Olympic stars stepping out of competition, do you see that as a general, is that a good indicator of maybe the state of emotional intelligence right now, that someone would feel okay to do that or have the courage to do that?
I don't know if it's emotional intelligence per se. It might be just changing culture. But I think that there's more and more awareness of what's called work-life balance everywhere, not just the Olympics, but in every company. And with a friend of mine at Case Western, Richard Boyatzis, who's in organizational behavior there, we designed what we call a personal sustainability index, where on the one hand, you assess the stressors in your life, and the other hand, you assess how much time you give to renewing yourself, to recovery from those stressors. When someone takes time out, who's in a highly competitive field, what they're doing is helping themselves recover. The body is designed to have periods of stress followed by recovery, not constant stress. That leads to burnout, emotional exhaustion. So the ability to say, yeah, I'm pushing myself too hard, and find a way to relax for a time, I think is extremely important. It has to do with that self-awareness, self-monitoring, and how you handle negative emotions.
Let's say the University of Cincinnati adopted your model of emotional intelligence. I know you said that this should be practiced on the individual level, but let's say the university made the decision to adopt the model. What does emotional intelligence look like on a systems level?
So organizationally, I think that there would be a lot of indicators. For example, meetings might be more productive. The organization itself would take an interest in whether people are burning out or not and encourage them in various ways, like granting leaves or offering wellness programs to help people sustain their ability to do what they're doing. There are lots of ways organization. I think leaders of the university, if you'll beg my pardon, might be more caring and humane. Maybe they are now, I don't know. But that would be a sign that they cared how the people that work for them fared. Faculty meetings might be less contentious. I don't know. That's a big one. And it has to do with the nature of academic professions. But there are lots of organizational signs. I don't know how they'd map on a university, because I've seen data from businesses where profit and growth increase. But one of the interesting signs is lower turnover. People quit less because it's an environment where they enjoy working. People get along better. People are more satisfied with their work. So I would say all of those would be signs at the organizational level. Now, at the student level, this is really interesting. What would you offer students for emotional intelligence? I would say a class or perhaps a whole major in emotional intelligence. Because first, you have to understand what it is. Second, why it matters. And third, what can I do to get more of it? Those are three different topics, really. The books I write are more, here's what it is and here's why it matters. How to develop it, though, there's a whole science there. I have a set of primers. It's called Building Blocks of Emotional Intelligence that goes into each of the competencies. I would prescribe that as that would be the textbook in the course. Here's what it is. And how to develop it. It helps to get an assessment of yourself and from people whose opinions you trust, who know you well. Compare those two and get it across the whole range of abilities and see where your biggest gaps are. See, do I need to be a better listener or whatever it may be? And compare that with where you would like to be in 5 or 10 years. What's your goal in life? What's your ideal self? Will this help me in that career path? And if it is, then develop a learning plan for that and practice the new way, say, of listening better at every opportunity. And it might be at school, it might be at home, it might be in your relationship, could be anywhere. The brain doesn't care. But keep practicing, because if you practice what you're doing, every time you go through a new behavioral sequence, it's like learning a skill like shooting baskets or playing golf. Every time you do that, every time you practice, you strengthen the neural circuitry underlying that sequence. So what you want to do is strengthen it to the point where one day it happens naturally, spontaneously, you don't have to think about it. At the beginning, you have to be mindful. You have to see, oh, here's an opportunity to practice. But if you do what I just described, and here I have data from Boyatzis, you will make the change successfully, and it will be so automatic that he's gone 7 years later where people worked and had them evaluated by people who work with them. It lasted. I don't know that college courses last that long. It's a different kind of learning. It's cognitive learning, where you have a mental map of a topic and you learn, a logarithm. I don't know what you may be studying, but you learn the new thing. It fits into the cognitive map. You have it right away. But that kind of learning may not last. The kind of learning I'm talking about is skill acquisition. And this is based in the brain, and it's going to last longer.
Warren talked about being generous company. He actually said those were the words he wanted on his tombstone. He wanted to be thought of as being generous. And I hear warm-heartedness from you, and I wonder what is that?
Warm-heartedness is kind of code for compassion, for caring, for concern, for thinking not just of ourselves, but other people, and radiating that feeling in connection and interactions in our relationships.
Do you think that I found this at the end of the Dax Shepard podcast? It seemed like you were starting to get into almost this like spiritual. The two of you were starting to get into this somewhat spiritual conversation. I know he had mentioned Alcoholics Anonymous, and you were speaking to kind of the spiritual element and background to that. I wonder, is there a spiritual element to this, given that you have worked with the Dalai Lama?
I've always been really interested in that dimension of life, because it informs our ethics, it informs our consciousness. So when I went to India, for example, I was very eager to meet and hang out with yogis and people who actually were devoting their lives to spirituality, because Asian cultures support that in a way we don't in the West. And I think it's to our detriment. So, for example, when Richie studied 14 yogis, he had to fly them over. He didn't find them in Indiana or Wisconsin, wherever he is, because Western culture does not do something, it does not recognize something that's kind of in the fabric of many Eastern cultures, which is that there is nourishment in being with someone, and this is what Warren is hinting at too, being with someone who cares and is warm-hearted, who cares about other people and is warm-hearted. And that's one of the aspects of living a spiritual life by definition. So in Eastern cultures, maybe less so now that they've become more westernized, but in Eastern cultures, it's long been a tradition to support people to live a spiritual life. In America, that just doesn't happen that much. And in fact, you in college are probably never encouraged to follow a spiritual path in life. It's more like, oh, what are you going to do? You know, when you finish college, what job are you going to get? It's not what inner wealth are you going to nourish, which I think is to our detriment, but that's the way our culture has its value hierarchy.
There's a group of students right now reading and meeting monthly around Warren's book on becoming a leader. And I know part of his framework is leaders know the context, and then they challenge that context, so they challenge that status quo. And as I'm hearing you talk about this, it makes me think that, you know, going back to that greater awareness, you know, having these practices would perhaps allow someone to see the context and to perhaps challenge the way that something's been done.
I hope so. As you have guided me through these questions, I see that that's been a thread in my life, that I've been kind of a challenger of the status quo. And I think status quos need to be challenged in order to stay vibrant.
What are some of the things that you feel you have most challenged?
Well, the idea of emotional intelligence itself was a challenge. It was there had been a bestseller called The Bell Curve while I was writing the book, which I was thinking of. The Bell Curve said, you know, it's all about your IQ. You know, the smarter you are, the better you are. Those people who aren't as smart as you, they're lesser than you. And I said, hey, buddy, you know, I've been to the smartest, you know, I went to colleges in the East where you had to have a very high test score to get in. And I saw that there was a range of kinds of people, some of whom were toxic but smart, and some of whom were nourishing but smart. What about this toxic nourishing dimension? You're ignoring that. And emotional intelligence is a way of speaking to that, I think. So that was one challenge. Being interested in meditation at a time when this was like a subversive thought, that was another one. But following that through to see it now like, oh yeah, everybody accepts mindfulness, that's good for you. That was another way of challenging it. So, and the environmental challenge, which is, I think that, you know, we know the comparative prices of everything we buy, but there's a blind spot around the environmental impacts of everything we buy. My feeling is, if that were transparent, if we knew it at point of purchase, we would create a free market force that would shift things towards sustainability, but we don't. So that's another challenge to the status quo.
The New York Times, Dan, seemed like a really influential place for you. I know you've referenced it in several talks. You've told some great stories about your time there. I know that that's the place where you discovered emotional intelligence. There was a story that you closed another talk with around a story covering, I believe it was homelessness in New York City, and it was inspiring to me. It was inspiring to me, I think, in encapsulating.
Here's what happened. For the time, I was kind of covering behavior in the brain for the science section of the Times. And I had an assignment to write about the homeless, which then was a new phenomenon in New York. And now, particularly in California, it's part of life. But and that is another story. It has to do with the closing of the mental hospitals and the lack of funding for community mental health centers. But anyway, that's what happened to start homelessness, put it in hyperdrive in California. But I was looking at the homeless and through the eyes of a clinical psychologist and seeing that many people who were living on the streets of New York at that time were diagnosable. They had schizophrenia, they had addiction problems, they were just too confused to get even the aid from welfare that they qualified for. So they ended up living in the streets. So after I had written that, and one thing that did for me was to reclaim the humanity of homeless people, because one of the things that hurts most about being homeless is all of a sudden you're invisible. People don't see you. So I started just, whenever I saw someone homeless, I'd stop and talk to them. And I was going home from the New York Times one Friday, it was rush hour, and it was Times Square, and I was going down the steps to the subway. Hundreds of people were walking with me. And I saw someone slumped on a step and people just stepping over them. And I stopped to see what was wrong with the person. The minute I stopped, a circle of people stopped with me. And it turned out this guy who had fainted from hunger. He spoke no English. He'd been wandering for days with no money, no food. And just very quickly, we got a subway cop, we got a hot dog, we got an orange juice, we got things that helped him get back on his feet and get taken care of. And I found that very inspiring because it made clear to me that each of us has the seed of compassion. It's just waiting for the right water to come along.
Dan, what is your vision for the future, for our future?
Well, there's a dim vision and a hopeful, bright vision. The bright vision is that there will be a massive change of value and heart, and that people of your generation will live in a way which values the greater good, both environmentally and socially, and that will begin to turn things around in the arc of history. The dim vision is it won't happen, we'll continue as we are, and that's a disaster. So I'm rooting for you.
How can we respond to your first vision? You have a captive audience of students trying to, discern what they want to do with their lives. How can we respond to your first vision?
Mahatma Gandhi had a really good question. He said, whatever decision you're about to make, ask yourself what will it mean for the poorest of the poor? And I think we can update that question and say, whenever I'm making a decision in my life, what does it mean for the planet and for the common good?
Dan, we've covered a lot today. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you would like to? I know you said you're not teaching right now, but this felt like, in the best way, a class today. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our class?
Well, if you'd like some homework, I would recommend The Force for Good, which is about the Dalai Lama's vision for the future. It's a good map.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for your time, for spending your afternoon with us, and the vision on our campus and with the Warren Bennis Leadership Initiative really is to create a leadership movement on campus. And Warren Bennis's legacy has been a huge part of that momentum. And from the start, what we said we wanted to do was we wanted to connect with the people that he knew and the people that he worked with. And so the opportunity to sit at your feet today and listen to your life, hear your legacy, has helped us move towards that vision. So,
well, I'd like to acknowledge your role in this, Jack, because it's your questioning and the arc of questions you took me through that helped me share in a meaningful way what I've done and why it matters. So thank you.